I was staring at my phone in complete disbelief when the insurance adjuster called to schedule an emergency inspection of my house for severe flood damage I supposedly had. The problem was, I lived in Scottsdale, Arizona, where we got maybe 10 inches of rain a year, and my house sat on elevated ground in a neighborhood that had never flooded once in its 40-year history. "I'm sorry, what flood damage?" I asked the adjuster, a woman named Patricia who sounded tired and professional. "We received a detailed report from a Brenda Carmichael stating that your property at 4782 Sagaro Vista Drive has sustained significant water damage from flooding." She provided photographs and a written statement indicating standing water in your yard, visible foundation cracks, and water stains on your exterior walls. I walked to my front window and looked out at my perfectly dry yard, the desert landscaping with rocks and cacti exactly as it had been for the 3 years since I bought the place. "That's completely false. There's no flood damage here. There's no water damage at all." "Nevertheless, Mr. Richardson, we need to send an adjuster out to verify the claim. This is a serious matter. If there is flood damage and you've failed to report it, that could affect your coverage. We have an opening tomorrow at 10 in the morning." I ran my hand through my hair, frustration building. Brenda Carmichael. Of course it was her. She was the vice president of our homeowners association and had made my life miserable since the day I moved in. It started with a violation notice about my mailbox being the wrong shade of beige, then escalated to complaints about my garbage cans being visible from the street for 12 minutes past the allowed time. And last month she tried to fine me for parking my work truck in my own driveway because she claimed it was a commercial vehicle. "Tomorrow at 10 is fine," I said, "but I'm telling you right now there's no flood damage. Someone is lying to you." Patricia's voice remained neutral. "We'll document everything during the inspection. If the claim is fraudulent, we have procedures for that." After I hung up, I immediately texted my neighbor Jake, who lived 2 houses down and was the only sane person on our street willing to openly complain about Brenda's reign of terror over our HOA. "You won't believe what Brenda just did," I typed, then explained the situation. His response came quickly. "That woman is unhinged. She tried to tell me last week that my Ocotillo plant was too tall and violated some made-up height restriction. I showed her the CC and Articus, and there's nothing about plant heights. She just walked away muttering." I spent the rest of the evening searching through my phone for any photos I'd recently taken of my property. I found several from just 3 days ago when I was showing my parents over video call the new pavers I'd installed in the backyard. Everything was bone dry, as it always was in the desert. I also checked my Ring doorbell footage, which had a clear view of my front yard and driveway. Not a drop of water anywhere. The next morning, I took the day off work and waited for Patricia to arrive. She pulled up in a white sedan at exactly 10 o'clock, carrying a clipboard and a professional camera. She was a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and no-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Richardson, I'm Patricia Chen, the adjuster assigned to your case." I shook her hand and gestured to my house. "As you can see, there's no flood damage. I don't know what Brenda told you, but she's lying." Patricia's expression didn't change. "Let's start with the exterior inspection." "Can you show me where your property lines are?" I walked her around the entire perimeter of my lot, pointing out the property markers. She took photographs of everything, making notes on her clipboard. My yard was immaculate, the desert landscaping professionally maintained. The rocks were arranged perfectly, the cacti healthy, the small patches of drought-resistant ground cover green and thriving. "Where does your drainage go during the monsoon season?" she asked. "We have a pretty good drainage system in this neighborhood. The water runs off into those channels." I pointed to the engineered drainage paths that ran between properties. designed specifically to handle the occasional heavy rains that came during Arizona's monsoon season. But we haven't had any significant rain in over a month. Patricia walked up to my foundation, running her hand along the stucco. No water stains, no efflorescence, no cracks beyond normal settling. She took more photographs. Can we check your crawl space and basement? There's no basement. This is a slab foundation standard for this area. She made a note. Can I see inside? I need to check for any interior water damage, particularly in lower areas and around windows. I let her into the house and followed her through every room. She checked the baseboards, looked under sinks, examined the areas around all the windows and doors. She went into my laundry room and inspected the water heater and washing machine connections. She even asked to see my attic access and used a flashlight to peer up into the space. After 45 minutes of thorough inspection, she returned to the living room and sat down at my kitchen table. Mr. Richardson, there is absolutely no evidence of flood damage, recent or otherwise, anywhere on this property. No water stains, no mold, no warping, no foundation issues. Nothing. I told you that. Can you explain why someone would file a false claim like this? I sat down across from her and told her everything about Brenda. The constant harassment, the petty violations, the way she seemed to have made it her personal mission to drive me out of the neighborhood. Patricia listened, taking notes. This is insurance fraud, she said quietly. Filing a false claim is a criminal offense. It wastes our resources. It could have resulted in your premiums increasing or your policy being canceled, and it's just plain illegal. What happens now? I'm going to file a report with my company and recommend that we refer this to law enforcement. We take fraud very seriously. Do you have any documentation of this harassment you mentioned? I pulled out my phone and showed her the dozens of violation notices Brenda had sent me over the past 3 years. I showed her emails where I'd disputed the charges and HOA board meeting minutes, where I'd formally complained about her conduct. I showed her text messages from other neighbors talking about similar harassment. Patricia photographed several of the documents. This establishes a pattern of behavior. Combined with the completely false insurance claim, this paints a clear picture. She handed me a business card. You should also consider filing a police report yourself. What she did could be prosecuted as filing a false insurance claim, harassment, and potentially other charges. After she left, I sat in my living room feeling vindicated but also anxious. Brenda wasn't the type to take this kind of thing lying down. If she found out I'd cooperated with the insurance investigation, she'd probably escalate her campaign against me. I decided to call my lawyer, Tom Hernandez, who'd helped me with the house purchase and had advised me a few times on HOA issues. His office was in downtown Scottsdale, and I got lucky catching him between appointments. She did what? Tom asked after I explained the situation. Filed a false flood damage claim with my insurance company. The adjuster just left and confirmed there's no damage. She's reporting it as fraud. Tom was quiet for a moment. David, this is beyond HOA overreach. This is potentially criminal. You need to file a police report, and you should also consider pursuing a civil harassment case against her. This pattern of behavior you've described, combined with this insurance fraud, gives you a strong case. Won't that make things worse? She's the HOA vice president. She could make my life even more miserable. She's already making your life miserable. And now she's committed a crime that could affect your insurance coverage, your home value, and your financial security. You need to push back hard on this. I made an appointment to come to his office the next day to discuss my options. Then, I drove to the Scottsdale Police Department to file a report. The officer who took my statement was a young guy named Officer Martinez who listened carefully and took detailed notes. You said the insurance adjuster is filing her own report. Yes, Patricia Chen from Southwest Home Insurance. She said she's recommending criminal charges. Good, that carries more weight than just your word against hers. Do you have the photographs and documentation you mentioned? I spent the next 30 minutes walking him through everything on my phone. He had me email all of it to him, and he gave me a case number. We'll investigate this, he said. Insurance fraud is taken seriously, especially when someone files a false claim about someone else's property. That shows malicious intent. We'll be in touch. I left the police station feeling like I'd at least taken action, but I knew this was just the beginning. When I got home, there was already a new violation notice stuck to my front door. This one claimed my house number wasn't properly visible from the street, and I had 24 hours to remedy the violation or face a $50 fine. I looked at my house numbers, which were clearly visible 6-inch bronze numbers mounted right next to my front door, exactly where they'd been since I moved in. I took a photo of them time-stamped and sent it to Jake. She knows, he texted back. Someone must have seen the insurance adjuster at your place. Brenda's probably freaking out. I didn't respond to the violation notice. Instead, I forwarded it to Tom's office with a note explaining it was likely retaliation for the insurance investigation. That evening, my Ring doorbell caught Brenda walking past my house 3 times, slowing down each time to stare at my property. She never came onto my driveway or walkway, staying on the public sidewalk, but the intent was clear. She was looking for something, anything, she could use against me. The next day, I met with Tom at his office. He'd already drafted a cease and desist letter and was working on a formal harassment complaint to file with the HOA board. The problem is she's on the board, I pointed out. Who's going to hold her accountable? The board has a responsibility to police its own members. If they fail to act, you have grounds to sue the entire HOA for allowing a board member to harass homeowners. That's a breach of their fiduciary duty. Tom leaned back in his chair. Plus, if criminal charges are filed against her for the insurance fraud, the board will have to take action. They can't have someone under criminal investigation serving in a leadership position. How long does something like this take? The criminal investigation could take weeks or months, but we can apply pressure now with the civil side. I'm going to send this cease and desist today, certified mail. She'll get it within a couple of days. If she violates it by continuing to harass you, that strengthens our case significantly. I authorized him to move forward and paid the retainer for his services. It felt surreal to be in this position. I'd bought a house in what seemed like a nice, quiet neighborhood, and now I was dealing with lawyers and police reports because some HOA busybody had decided to make me her personal project. Over the next week, things got weirder. I received 2 more violation notices, one claiming my palm tree needed trimming even though I didn't have a palm tree, and another stating that I'd been seen working on my car in my driveway, which violated some rule about auto repairs on the property. The car repair claim was particularly absurd because I didn't even own a car that I could work on myself. I drove a newer Toyota that I took to the dealership for all service. I documented everything, photographing each notice and emailing it to Tom and including it in my growing file for the police investigation. Then, about 10 days after the insurance inspection, I got a call from Officer Martinez. Mr. Richardson, I wanted to update you on the investigation. We've interviewed Miss Carmichael, and she's claiming that she filed the insurance report because she was genuinely concerned about potential water damage to your property. She says she saw water pooling in your yard after a rainstorm. We haven't had a rainstorm in over a month. I know, we checked the weather records. That's one of several problems with her story. She also claimed she had photographs of the water damage, but when we asked to see them, she said she deleted them because they were taking up space on her phone. That's convenient. Very. We're continuing the investigation, and we're coordinating with your insurance company's fraud investigation unit. They have their own investigators looking into this. Miss Carmichael should consider herself on notice that this is a serious matter. After I hung up, I felt some satisfaction that the investigation was moving forward, but I also knew Brenda wasn't going to back down easily. People like her never did. The following Monday, I got a notice in the mail that there would be an emergency HOA board meeting on Wednesday evening to discuss ongoing violations and neighborhood concerns. No agenda was provided and my name wasn't mentioned, but I had a strong suspicion this was about me. I forwarded the notice to Tom, who advised me to attend the meeting and to record it if Arizona law allowed. I looked it up, and Arizona is a one-party consent state, meaning I could legally record a conversation I was part of. I planned to do exactly that. Wednesday evening arrived, and I walked to the community clubhouse where HOA meetings were held. It was a small building at the entrance to our neighborhood, with a meeting room that could hold about 30 people. When I arrived, there were maybe 15 people there, including all 5 board members. Brenda sat at the front table, looking smug. She was in her late 50s, with the kind of highlighted blonde hair that required weekly maintenance and an expression that suggested she'd been complaining to a manager somewhere just before she arrived. The HOA president, a mild-mannered retired accountant named Gerald Morrison, sat next to her looking uncomfortable. I took a seat in the back row, pulled out my phone, and started a voice recording app. Jake arrived a few minutes later and sat next to me. "This should be good," he whispered. Gerald called the meeting to order and went through some standard business, approving the previous meeting's minutes and discussing the budget for landscape maintenance. Then he paused and looked at his notes. "We have one item under new business. Brenda, you wanted to address some concerns." Brenda stood up, smoothing her blazer. "Yes, thank you, Gerald. I want to bring to the board's attention an ongoing issue with one of our homeowners who has repeatedly violated our community standards and has created a hostile environment in response to reasonable requests for compliance." I kept my face neutral, but inside I was seething. This homeowner has failed to maintain his property to our standards, has violated multiple provisions of our CC and RTCS, and recently has been harassing board members who are simply trying to do their volunteer jobs of keeping our community beautiful. "That's interesting," I said loudly from the back of the room, "because I've been documenting every false violation notice you've sent me, Brenda." She whipped around to glare at me. "Excuse me, you're out of order. This is not the public comment period." Gerald cleared his throat. "Actually, Brenda, if you're going to make accusations about a specific homeowner, they have the right to respond. David, did you want to address the board?" I stood up and walked to the front, my phone still recording in my pocket. I've lived here for 3 years. In that time, Brenda has sent me over 40 violation notices, most of them for things that either don't exist or aren't actually violations of the CC and RTCS. I've had my mailbox color challenged, my garbage can timing monitored, my work truck questioned, and my landscaping criticized, all while my property has been maintained to the same or higher standards as everyone else in this neighborhood. "You parked a commercial vehicle overnight," Brenda snapped. "It's a pickup truck with a small company logo. According to the CC and RTCS, that's allowed as long as it's not a vehicle over 1-ton capacity or a vehicle with commercial equipment attached. My truck is a half-ton Ford F-150 with a magnetic door sign. It's perfectly within the rules." Gerald looked at Brenda. "Is that accurate?" She pressed her lips together. "The spirit of the rule is to prevent commercial vehicles." The letter of the rule is what matters, I said, but that's not even the main issue. The main issue is that Brenda filed a false report with my homeowner's insurance company claiming my house had flood damage. The room went completely silent. Several board members looked at each other in shock. "That's ridiculous," Brenda said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "I simply reported what I observed." "You reported flood damage that doesn't exist. An insurance adjuster came to my house and found absolutely no evidence of any water damage. None. She filed a report stating the claim was fraudulent." Gerald leaned forward. "Brenda, is this true? Did you contact David's insurance company?" "I contacted them out of concern for the integrity of our neighborhood. If a property has unreported damage, it affects all of our property values." "You filed a false insurance claim," I said. "That's fraud." "The police are investigating, and the insurance company has its own fraud investigators looking into it." The color drained from Brenda's face. "I did no such thing. I reported what I saw." "What did you see exactly? Because we haven't had measurable rain in over a month. The Weather Service confirms that, so where did this flood damage come from?" She opened her mouth and closed it again. "I saw standing water." "Where? Show me in the photographs you took." "I don't have photographs." "Exactly, because there was no water, you made it up." Another board member, a woman named Susan Chen, spoke up. "Brenda, this is very serious. If you filed a false insurance claim, that's illegal. The HOA could be liable if you did this in your capacity as a board member." "I was acting as a concerned neighbor," Brenda said quickly. "You identified yourself as HOA vice president when you called the insurance company," I said. "I have that confirmed from the adjuster." Gerald stood up. "I think we need to table this discussion and convene an executive session with the board only. David, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll be looking into this matter." "There's one more thing," I said. "Since the insurance inspection, I've received 4 more violation notices, all of them for things that are either false or not violations. I believe this is retaliation for the insurance investigation. My attorney has already filed a cease and desist letter regarding the harassment, and if it continues, I'll be pursuing legal action against both Brenda and the HOA." Gerald nodded slowly. "Noted. We'll be reviewing all recent violation notices as part of our investigation." The meeting broke up quickly after that. Several neighbors came up to me afterward to quietly tell me they'd experienced similar harassment from Brenda, but had been too intimidated to fight back. One couple, the Johnsons, said they'd actually sold their house and moved because of her constant complaints and fines. "She made our lives miserable for 2 years, Mrs. Johnson said. "We were so happy to get out, but we lost money on the sale because we were desperate to leave. I wish we'd fought back like you are." Jake walked out with me. "That was intense." "Do you think the board will actually do anything?" "They have to. If they don't, they're opening themselves up to massive liability." Tom said if the board knows about harassment and doesn't stop it, they're as guilty as Brenda. Over the next few days, things in the neighborhood were quiet. I didn't receive any new violation notices. My Ring camera showed that Brenda hadn't walked past my house. I started to hope that maybe the board had actually talked to her and told her to back off. Then, 2 weeks after the board meeting, I got a call from Officer Martinez. "Mr. Richardson, I wanted to give you an update. We've completed our investigation, and we're filing charges against Brenda Carmichael for filing a false insurance claim. It's a Class 6 felony in Arizona. She'll be receiving a summons to appear in court." I sat down heavily on my couch. Wow, I knew it was serious, but I didn't think it would actually lead to criminal charges. The evidence is pretty clear. She filed a detailed report about damage that didn't exist. She claimed to have witnessed things that couldn't have happened based on weather records, and when we interviewed her, her story kept changing. Plus, the insurance company's fraud unit found that she called them twice, once to make the initial report and once to follow up, and push them to inspect your property quickly. That shows intent and persistence. What happens now? She'll go through the court system. Given that it's her first offense and it's a Class 6 felony, she might get offered a plea deal. Could be probation, community service, fines. Or if she fights it and loses, she could face jail time, though that's less likely for a first-time offender on this kind of charge. After I hung up, I called Tom to let him know. He was pleased with the news. This strengthens your civil case significantly. A criminal conviction, or even a plea deal admission, shows that she engaged in illegal conduct targeting you. We can use that to pursue damages for harassment and emotional distress. I don't know if I want to drag this out in civil court. I just want her to leave me alone. Think about it this way, Tom said. If you don't hold her accountable, she'll just do this to someone else. From what you've told me, she's been terrorizing your neighborhood for years. This is your chance to stop that. He was right, of course. I'd talked to enough neighbors to know that Brenda had been abusing her position for a long time. If I let this drop, she'd just move on to her next target. Okay, I said. Let's move forward with the civil case. Tom drafted a lawsuit against both Brenda personally and the HOA, alleging harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and negligent supervision by the HOA board. We were seeking actual damages for my legal fees and time spent dealing with her harassment, plus punitive damages to send a message. When the lawsuit was filed, I had it served on Brenda at her house and on the HOA board at their registered agent address. Within a day, my phone started ringing. The first call was from Gerald, the HOA president. David, I just received notice that you're suing the HOA. Can we talk about this? I'm suing because the board allowed Brenda to harass me for 3 years without taking any action. You all knew what she was doing. I complained at multiple board meetings. Other homeowners complained. Nobody did anything. We talked to her. We told her to be more careful about the violation notices. That's not enough. She filed a false insurance claim that could have destroyed my coverage and cost me thousands of dollars. And she did it using her position as HOA vice president to give herself credibility with the insurance company. The HOA is responsible for supervising its board members. Gerald sighed. What would it take to settle this? I want Brenda removed from the board immediately. I want a formal apology from the HOA. I want all the fines and violations she's issued against me rescinded. And I want reimbursement for my legal fees. I'll bring it to the board. But I should tell you, Brenda is already threatening to sue the HOA herself if we remove her from the board. She's claiming we're not supporting her. That's your problem to deal with, not mine. You need to decide whether you want to protect a board member who committed a crime or protect the homeowners you're supposed to serve. The second call was from Brenda's lawyer, a woman named Jennifer Hastings. Mr. Richardson, I represent Brenda Carmichael. I'd like to discuss the possibility of resolving this matter without further litigation. Your client filed a false insurance claim against me. She's being charged with a felony. What's there to discuss? Miss Carmichael maintains that she genuinely believed there was water damage and was acting in good faith. She's willing to apologize for any misunderstanding and to refrain from any future contact with you. A misunderstanding. She made up a flood that never happened. She called my insurance company twice to push them to inspect my property. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a deliberate attempt to cause me harm. What would you want in order to settle the civil case? She resigns from the HOA board. She pays my legal fees. She issues a written apology that gets sent to every homeowner in the neighborhood. and she agrees to a permanent restraining order that prevents her from having any involvement in HOA business that affects me. Those are pretty steep demands. She committed a felony. She's lucky I'm not asking for more. Jennifer said she'd discuss it with her client and get back to me. I didn't hold my breath expecting a quick resolution. Meanwhile, word had spread through the neighborhood about the criminal charges. I started getting thank you messages from neighbors who'd suffered under Brenda's reign. Several people approached me about adding their stories to my lawsuit. Tom advised me that we could potentially turn it into a class action case if enough people came forward with similar experiences. Within a week, we had 8 other families who wanted to join the lawsuit. Each had their own horror stories of Brenda's harassment. The Martinses had been fined repeatedly for their children's toys being visible in their front yard, even though the CC and Articus only prohibited permanent structures, not temporary items. The Patels had been cited for their doormat being the wrong color. The Williamses had been threatened with fines for having guests park on the street during a birthday party, even though street parking was legal and clearly allowed in the neighborhood rules. Tom restructured the lawsuit to include all the plaintiffs, and we refiled it as a class action harassment case against Brenda and the HOA. The damages we were seeking now totaled over $200,000. That got everyone's attention. The HOA's insurance company got involved, sending their own lawyers to try to negotiate a settlement. They wanted to distance the HOA from Brenda's actions and claim she was acting outside her authority. That's going to be hard to prove, Tom told me during a meeting at his office. She used her title as VP to file the insurance claim against you. She used HOA letterhead for all the violation notices. She collected fines on behalf of the HOA. She was acting well within the scope of her authority, which means the HOA is liable for her actions. The HOA's lawyers tried to argue that Brenda had gone rogue, but we had emails and board meeting minutes showing that other board members knew about her aggressive enforcement tactics and had tacitly approved them. Gerald had even praised her once for her dedication to maintaining community standards. While the civil case was grinding through discovery, the criminal case moved forward. Brenda had her first court appearance, where she pleaded not guilty to the charge of filing a false insurance claim. Her lawyer tried to get the case dismissed, arguing that she had made an honest mistake, but the judge denied the motion. The prosecutor had too much evidence showing that Brenda had deliberately fabricated the flood damage story. I had to testify at a preliminary hearing, explaining the timeline of events and the history of harassment. The prosecutor, an assistant district attorney named Michael Reyes, was thorough in his questioning. Mr. Richardson, you testified that Miss Carmichael had sent you numerous violation notices over the 3 years you lived in the neighborhood. Can you characterize the nature of those notices? Most of them were either completely false or were nitpicking minor things that weren't actually violations of the HOA rules. For example, she claimed my mailbox was the wrong color, but when I showed the board the approved color chart, my mailbox was within the acceptable range. She claimed I left my garbage cans out too long, but the time she cited was only 12 minutes past the deadline and was due to the garbage truck running late. And the insurance claim, when did you first become aware of it? I got a call from the insurance adjuster saying they'd received a report of flood damage. I was completely shocked because there was no flood damage. My house is in the desert on elevated land. We haven't had significant rain in months. What did you do when you received that call? I scheduled the inspection immediately because I wanted to clear up what was obviously a false claim. The adjuster came out, did a thorough inspection, and confirmed there was no damage at all. And how did you learn that Miss Carmichael was the one who filed the claim? The adjuster told me. She said Brenda had identified herself as the HOA vice president and had filed a detailed report claiming to have personally observed water damage to my property. Brenda's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to suggest that maybe there had been water damage that I'd quickly repaired before the inspection, but it didn't make sense. Even if I'd somehow dried out my entire property in the day between the insurance company's call and the inspection, there would still be evidence. Water damage leaves stains, causes mold, creates foundation issues. None of that could be fixed in 24 hours. The judge found probable cause to proceed to trial, and a court date was set for 2 months out. Around this time, the HOA board finally took action. They held a special meeting and voted to remove Brenda from her position as vice president. She showed up at the meeting with her lawyer and threatened to sue, but the board stood firm. They cited her criminal indictment and the pending civil lawsuit as evidence that she was no longer fit to serve. Brenda went nuclear. She stood up in the meeting and screamed at the board members, calling them cowards and traitors. She said she'd dedicated years of her life to the HOA, and this was how they repaid her. Security had to escort her out of the building. After that meeting, I got a late-night text from Jake. Brenda just posted a huge rant on the neighborhood Facebook page. You need to see this. I logged into the private neighborhood group and found a novel-length post from Brenda. She claimed she was the victim of a conspiracy, that I had somehow manipulated the insurance company and the police, that the other board members were jealous of her dedication, and that the neighborhood was going to fall into chaos without her enforcement of standards. She specifically called me out by name, calling me a troublemaker, and claiming I'd been planning to undermine the HOA since the day I moved in. I screenshotted everything and sent it to Tom. Is this defamation? Possibly. Save everything. If she keeps this up, we can add it to the lawsuit. But Brenda wasn't done. Over the next few days, she started driving past my house multiple times a day. My Ring camera captured her slowly cruising by, sometimes stopping for a few minutes to stare at my property. She never got out of her car or came onto my property, so she wasn't technically trespassing, but it was clearly intended to intimidate me. I reported it to Officer Martinez, who said they'd document it as potential stalking behavior. If she makes contact with you directly or if she comes onto your property, call 911 immediately. What she's doing now isn't quite enough for a restraining order, but it's getting close. The harassment continued in subtle ways. Someone knocked over my mailbox one night, and while I couldn't prove it was Brenda, my Ring camera showed a car that looked like hers driving past shortly before it happened. Someone also left a pile of dog waste on my driveway, again with no proof but suspicious timing. I installed additional security cameras to cover all angles of my property. I also started parking my truck in the garage instead of the driveway, just to eliminate opportunities for anyone to vandalize it. The civil lawsuit moved into mediation. All the parties sat down in a conference room with a professional mediator, a retired judge named Arthur Feldman. He heard from everyone involved, reviewed the evidence, and then started shuttle diplomacy between the rooms. The HOA wanted to settle. Their insurance company was willing to pay damages to make the case go away, and the board members were tired of the drama. They offered to pay all legal fees for the plaintiffs, to issue a formal apology, to permanently ban Brenda from serving in any HOA capacity, and to pay $20,000 in damages split among all the plaintiffs. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but Tom advised me it was a reasonable offer. You'd get maybe $2,000 or $3,000 after legal fees. But more importantly, you get the satisfaction of knowing you held them accountable and changed the HOA's practices going forward. Brenda's lawyers, on the other hand, weren't offering anything close to reasonable. They wanted her to pay $500 to me personally issue a private apology, and that was it. No admission of wrongdoing, no restraining order, nothing. That's insulting, I told Tom. I agree. Let's reject it and tell them we're prepared to go to trial. The mediation broke up without a settlement with Brenda, though we did reach an agreement with the HOA. They paid out the settlement, issued the apology, and agreed to implement new policies to prevent board members from abusing their authority. Part of the settlement included mandatory training for all board members on harassment and proper enforcement procedures. I signed the settlement agreement feeling like I'd won at least a partial victory. The HOA was reformed, Brenda was banned from leadership, and I'd recovered my legal fees. But I still wanted Brenda to face consequences for what she'd done to me specifically. The criminal trial date arrived in late June. I took another day off work and went to the courthouse in downtown Phoenix. The trial was held in a small courtroom with a jury of 12 people who'd been selected over the previous 2 days. The prosecutor laid out the case methodically. He called the insurance adjuster, Patricia Chen, who testified about the false claim and her inspection that found no damage. He called a meteorologist who testified about rainfall patterns in Scottsdale and confirmed there had been no significant rain in the relevant time period. He called me to testify about the harassment and the false claim. Brenda's defense was that she had genuinely believed there was water damage. Her lawyer put her on the stand, and she testified that she'd seen what she thought was standing water in my yard one morning and had been concerned about potential foundation damage affecting neighborhood property values. On cross-examination, the prosecutor destroyed her story. Miss Carmichael, you testified you saw standing water in Mr. Richardson's yard. What date was that? I don't recall exactly. Sometime in March. We've established that there was no measurable rainfall in Scottsdale during March. Where did this water come from? Maybe a sprinkler, Mr. Richardson has desert landscaping with a drip irrigation system. He doesn't have sprinklers that could create standing water. Did you investigate where the water came from before filing the insurance claim? I thought it was from rain, but there was no rain. Did you take photographs of this standing water? I thought I did, but I must have deleted them. You must have deleted them. How convenient. Miss Carmichael, did you call Mr. Richardson before filing the insurance claim to ask him about the alleged water damage? No. Did you mention it to him when you sent him other violation notices? No. Did you bring it up at any HOA board meetings? I don't recall. You don't recall. But you were concerned enough about it to call his insurance company twice, identifying yourself as the HOA vice president, and to file a detailed report claiming you'd observed significant water damage. Does that seem consistent with someone who doesn't recall whether they brought it up at board meetings? Brenda's face was red. I was concerned about the neighborhood. Or were you concerned about harassing Mr. Richardson, as you'd been doing for 3 years with false violation notices? Her lawyer objected, but the damage was done. The jury looked skeptical. The prosecutor also called 2 of my neighbors who testified about Brenda's pattern of harassment against multiple homeowners. Their testimony established that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a long pattern of behavior. The trial lasted 2 days. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning with a verdict, guilty of filing a false insurance claim. Brenda's face went white when the verdict was read. Her lawyer immediately requested an appeal, but the judge denied bail pending sentencing, citing concerns that Brenda might continue to harass witnesses. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for a month later. In the meantime, Brenda was released on her own recognizance but was ordered to stay away from me and my property. At the sentencing hearing, the judge was stern. He'd reviewed all the evidence, including the civil lawsuit documentation that showed the pattern of harassment. Miss Carmichael, you abused a position of trust in your community. You used your role as HOA vice president to target a homeowner who'd done nothing wrong. And when your petty harassment didn't drive him away, you escalated to filing a false insurance claim that could have had serious consequences for his coverage and his finances. This is exactly the kind of abuse of authority that erodes trust in community organizations. He sentenced her to 2 years of supervised probation, 300 hours of community service, a $5,000 fine, and restitution to the insurance company for the cost of their investigation. He also issued a permanent restraining order preventing her from having any contact with me or coming within 500 feet of my property. After the sentencing, I stood on the courthouse steps with Tom, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "It's over," I said. "Not quite, we still have the civil case against her personally." That case went to trial in August. Without the criminal conviction, it might have been harder to prove, but with Brenda now a convicted felon for the insurance fraud, the civil case was straightforward. The jury awarded me $15,000 in damages for harassment and emotional distress, plus all my legal fees. Brenda had to sell her house to pay the judgments against her. She and her husband moved out of the neighborhood in September, 8 months after this whole ordeal began. The HOA was transformed by the experience. The new vice president was a younger guy named Marcus Williams, one of the plaintiffs in the class action suit. He implemented new policies that required violation notices to cite specific CC and R provisions, and to be reviewed by at least 2 board members before being sent. He also created an appeals process so homeowners could challenge violations without having to hire lawyers. The neighborhood became a much more pleasant place to live. People stopped being afraid of petty enforcement actions and started actually enjoying their homes. We had a neighborhood barbecue in October, and it was the first time in years that people felt comfortable gathering without worrying about HOA violations for parking or noise. I settled into a quiet routine, finally able to enjoy my house without constantly looking over my shoulder. My landscaping flourished, my house stayed in good repair, and I never received another violation notice. Jake and I became good friends through the whole ordeal. We started a weekly poker game with some other neighbors, and we'd often joke about the Brenda situation, though it was always with a sense of relief that it was finally over. One evening in November, almost a year after the insurance adjuster's inspection, I got an unexpected call from Patricia Chen. "Mr. Richardson, I wanted to follow up with you. I thought you'd like to know that our fraud investigation unit has implemented new protocols based on the Carmichael case. We now require photographic evidence for any third-party damage reports, and we verify the relationship between the reporting party and the property before proceeding with inspections." That's great to hear. Your case really opened our eyes to how HOA positions can be abused. We've flagged several similar cases in other neighborhoods where board members were filing false claims about homeowners they had disputes with. You probably prevented a lot of other people from going through what you went through. After she hung up, I sat on my back patio, looking out at the desert landscape I'd worked so hard to maintain. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. It was peaceful. I thought about everything that had happened. The stress, the legal battles, the harassment. But also the victory, the reformed HOA, the neighborhood coming together. It had been worth fighting back. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Poker game tomorrow night. Marcus is bringing his famous guacamole." I smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." Life in the neighborhood finally felt like what it should have been from the beginning. A community of people living their lives, taking care of their properties, and looking out for each other. No petty tyrants, no abuse of power, no harassment disguised as rule enforcement. The flood that Brenda claimed happened never existed, but her lies had created a different kind of flood. A flood of accountability that washed away the toxic HOA culture she'd created and left something better in its place. I learned a lot through the experience. I learned that documentation is everything, that standing up to bullies is necessary even when it's difficult, and that one person fighting back can create positive change for an entire community. I also learned that HOAs, when run properly by people who genuinely care about the neighborhood rather than their own power, can actually be beneficial. The civil settlement money went into my home improvement fund. I used it to upgrade my back patio, adding a pergola and some new outdoor furniture. It felt appropriate to invest it back into the property that had been at the center of so much conflict. The criminal restitution that Brenda had to pay to the insurance company was donated by Southwest Home Insurance to a nonprofit that helped homeowners navigate HOA disputes. Patricia Chen told me about it when she called to let me know. Your case inspired our CEO to do something positive. This nonprofit provides free legal consultation to people dealing with HOA harassment. They've already helped about 50 families in Arizona. That might have been the best outcome of all. My individual victory had turned into systemic change that helped other people avoid what I went through. The following spring, I was elected to the HOA board myself. I'd never wanted to be involved in HOA politics, but several neighbors convinced me that having someone with first-hand experience of HOA abuse would help keep the board honest and accountable. I served one 2-year term, working with Marcus and the other board members to continue reforming policies and creating a more transparent, fair system. We published all the CC and articles on the neighborhood website with clear explanations of what each rule meant. We created a quarterly newsletter to keep homeowners informed about board decisions. We implemented a formal process for homeowners to request variances or appeal decisions. By the time my term ended, our HOA had become a model for other neighborhoods. We were even invited to present at a statewide conference about HOA reform, sharing the lessons learned from the Brenda situation. Looking back now, more than 2 years after that initial phone call from the insurance adjuster, I can see how much everything changed. What started as one person's malicious lie became a catalyst for positive reform that affected hundreds of families. Brenda's attempt to destroy me with a false flood damage claim had backfired spectacularly. She'd lost her position, her reputation, her house, and gained a criminal record. Meanwhile, I'd found my voice, built stronger relationships with my neighbors, and helped create lasting positive change in my community. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brenda had always claimed she was protecting the neighborhood's integrity and property values. In the end, it was her removal and the reforms that followed that actually improved the neighborhood. Property values did go up, but not because of strict enforcement of petty rules. They went up because people wanted to live in a community that was fair, transparent, and welcoming. I still live in the same house on Saguaro Vista Drive. My yard is still immaculate, my desert landscaping still thrives, and I've never had any actual flood damage despite Brenda's fictional claims. The difference is that now I can enjoy my home without constantly worrying about harassment or false accusations. On quiet evenings, I sit on my patio and watch the sunset, grateful for the peace that came from standing up for myself and for the community that emerged stronger from the conflict. The phantom flood that never existed had still managed to wash away something toxic and leave something better in its wake. And that, in the end, was a flood worth weathering.